Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending our Chiltern Branch meeting, especially for those of you in different time zones, either early in the morning or getting later in the evening. We're actually mixing things up a bit tonight with a panel discussion. I am really proud personally and excited that the Chiltern Branch has continued to host informative and insightful discussions, attended not only by the branch members, but other IOSH and non-IOSH members across the globe. And today's session is no exception. My colleague David Thomas and I will be moderating the session where we have three excellent panelists, leaders in their business. And I'd now like to introduce our three guests who I'm really grateful for them taking their time from their schedules to provide their perspective on this critical topic, the future of the health and safety professional, especially in a post-pandemic world. So first up, Clive Lloyd, who is calling in from Australia, where it's actually 4 a.m. So many thanks, Clive. So real dedication, and we're really grateful for you being able to join us today.
Pleasure.
So Clive is an Australian psychologist who assists high-hazard organizations to improve their safety performance through the development of trust and psychological safety, and by leading safety differently. He was recently named among the top 5 global thought leaders and influencers on health and safety by Thinkers 360, and is the author of the Amazon best-selling book, Next Generation Safety Leadership, From Compliance to Care. Hi, I'm Clive. Do you just want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. I was saying earlier, it's 4 a.m., so I'm probably going to get better as we go along, as the coffee kicks in.
No, really, really thankful for you joining us today.
Pleasure.
Good. Next is Katie Seabrook, who's actually calling in from the US. So Katie works with multinational and US companies across industry sector who are focused on their people, supply chain workers, and health and safety. She leverages a risk-based approach to workplace safety and health with the outcome of operational, commercial, and health and safety excellence and sustainable, resilient corporate performance. Katie is a past president and fellow of the American Society of Safety Professionals, a fellow of the British Institution of Occupational Safety and Health, former chair of the Center for Safety and Health Sustainability, and was appointed to the US National Academies of Science Gulf Research Program Risk Committee. And Katie is also a founder and CEO of Global Solutions, Inc. It's a very impressive profile as well. Katie, do you want to say hi?
Greetings, everyone. With a bit of a different accent. I'm delighted to be here. I have to tell you, we have a bit of English weather here, though, where I am in the New York area. So thank you very much, Melissa, for having me here. This is awesome.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, we've had some good weather, but it's kind of turning again.
Bring it on.
And last but not least, we are very happy to have Richard Orton here with us from the IOSH Central team. Richard is the Director of Strategy and Business Development at IOSH and a member of the senior leadership team. He is leading IOSH activities with policymakers, regulators, and the investment and business communities globally, helping to shape sustainable strategies and cultures that have the safety, health, and well-being of people and society at their core. He's also Managing Director of IOSH Services Limited, ensuring that the strategic goals of the charity and the commercial activities align to offer practical solutions to organizations that demonstrate how targeted investment in safety, health, and well-being can both help to deliver long-term strategic objectives and have immediate impact across the organization, from bottom line results to organizational resilience and reputation. So welcome, Richard.
Hi, glad to be here.
Yes, thank you. And Richard is calling from the UK. So as you may have realized, we've spanned across the world. We have Australia, UK, and the United States. And, just going through the profiles of our three panelists, really well connected to the conversation that we want to have today. So just want to say thanks again to everyone for making the time. Richard and Katie. So good. So I'll kick it off. I have a question I'd like to ask and hear from the three of you all. So Recently, there was a study that came out from ERM that said that had a kind of conclusion that said attitudes to health and safety have gone through a metamorphosis in the last 2 years. Changing societal expectations, rising focus on ESG, which is environment, social, and governance, investor pressure, and responses to the global pandemic have accelerated established trends and put the spotlight on a number of areas of growing concerns. Rising intolerance of any adverse impacts on people and their well-being at work will have increasing impacts on business and business leaders. So I wanted to get your views based on your experience, your background, the areas you're looking into. Where do you recommend health and safety professionals focus their attention in the next 1 to 3 years? So maybe Clive, we'll hear from you first and then ask Kathy and then Richard.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. And look, I'm always going to say when it comes down to where should health and safety professionals put their energy and time and attention, I'm always going to say things like relationships and building trust, but I'll say more about those specific areas later. One thing that has struck me lately, and particularly here in Australia, is maybe the lack of awareness of psychosocial risks. We're very, very aware of physical risks to our people. Historically, we haven't been as well equipped to identify psychological risks and social risks. And I think that's going to need to be an area. Even work design. We, of course, design work to be physically safe. We put guards in place, we have PPE and so forth. But when it comes to psychological risks and social risks, really work design has not perhaps been at the forefront of our thinking. An example here in Australia would be the fly-in, fly-out rosters, for example. And what we know is the longer those rosters or the more unequal those rosters, for example, if it's 1 week or 3 weeks at work, 1 week away, we know the more unequal those rosters are, the more mental health challenges we get and so forth. So that's well known in the research. It's not readily conceded by the companies that use those longer rosters. But again, work design will mean we'll need to start looking at that. This needs to be evidence-based. As we look at unequal rosters, what we can predict there is you're going to have more incidents of mental health. So I think, yeah, really focusing on the design of work itself is going to be quite an important thing in the psychosocial risk area.
Thanks, Clive, for that perspective. Kathy?
Oh yeah, to build on Clive, I think you're spot on. For me, on the absolute opposite side, it's knowing the business environment in which you're operating. One of the things that sometimes health and safety professionals do is we're so focused on our work, putting out those fires, getting those management systems in place that we don't tend to really be looking up and out of our organizations to see what's really coming our way in terms of horizon scanning. And so I would say that looking at alignment, and I like the relationship building, it's truly finding allies that are not traditional to health and safety, like the investor relations, if you're a larger company, or your VP of communications. What does that look like? And what do your competitors look like? What are they doing? And then just the other couple of things. ESG fluency, sustainability, corporate responsibility, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. That is just like winning the lottery for us. Materiality and the concepts of materiality. What does that mean relative to safety and health risk? So that alignment there. ISO 45001, and to follow on what Clive was just saying, there's a new standard that should be out by the end of the year, actually probably in the autumn, on ISO 45003. I'm part of the leadership team from ISO. So I'm thinking hopefully it's more autumn, but around psychological safety and health at work. And then finally, well-being, which ties into psychological health and safety, but it's much broader. And this is what organizations, this is what the investors, this is what a lot of our external as well as internal stakeholders are asking for. And that world of work, because of COVID, the world of work is changing, right? And the whole concept of remote working, whether that we're going back to where we are or whether we're staying where we are, really is going to be by company and by industry sector. That part is not going to change. So the way in which work is done, the hazards, the risks associated with them, we really are going to have to keep ahead of that in order to be future fit.
Mm. No, thanks, Kathy. Before I ask Richard to add from an IOSH specific piece, just to let you know, if you have a question or comment, please put it in the chat, and we'll raise it to the group as well. So, Richard.
So I'm going to agree primarily with some of the things Kathy said and build on it. And I guess the clue's in my job title, and I should have declared earlier that I'm not actually an OSH professional. So I am a chartered fellow of a different body, and I think the my answer will give a clue to perhaps my background a little bit. So I think over the next 1 to 3 years, the most important thing that anybody can do is understand the environment they're working in. And when I looked at the list in the report, virtually everything in that list was an external thing that the organization couldn't control, but it would impact on the organization. So it's what as a strategist I'd call a macro environment factor. It's something that's going to happen outside of your control, but it could potentially happen to you. So really, the key things I'd encourage anybody to do would be understand your company's strategy and what it's trying to do. So, don't let the company put you in a silo and say you're the person that does safety and health, get over there and make people safer and healthier. Understand your company's strategy, and the reason why that's really important is it will allow you to stand out from the herd, because lots of people will be trying to do their thing and explain why their thing's more important and needs more investment and needs more management time. But if you can express what you need in such a volatile environment over the next 1 to 3 years in the language of how the company's measuring its results. So you described my role. So if you think of my role in ISL, IOSH Services Limited, as the MD of a small to medium sized enterprise, an SME, the kind of size of organisation, frankly, that employs the majority of our members, we don't worry directly about health and safety. What we do worry about are things like our reputation. Is the business resilient? And health and safety affects all of those kinds of things, but it's not a macro factor. It's something within the organization and something we can control. So I'd really encourage you to think about what's happening in the organization's environment, how the organization measures its success, and what you can do around that. I think the technical aspects of OSH have been extremely well covered by Clive and Kathy. There will be some changes, but they're quite well understood, and there's some great thought leadership around it to help you on that bit of the journey. But I'd also encourage you to think about your CPD in that context. Therefore, a lot of this is in the competency. In the competency framework. So if you think about what's going to happen around you in the world, think about the skills you might need in that. And Clive and Kathy have described those really, really well. Then what are you going to do to prepare yourself for that future? And that's largely about where you want your career to go, frankly. If you're happy and feeling satisfied doing something operational on the ground, supporting colleagues on a daily basis, then brilliant. Focus more on the technical side. But if you aspire to perhaps progress your career to something more of a leadership role, then understand the strategy of your company and learn what they're measuring and how they're going to judge your success.
Okay. No, thanks, Richard. I want to ask a follow-up question on, and any of you all can answer it, in terms of, is it so, this will be a closed question, but with a follow-up. Is it solely the role of the health and safety professional in this space, or is there a role for organizations, leaders, and associations in supporting the professional as we move forward with this change, if there is a change? So okay, Kathy, yeah.
No, I said, who did you do first? So I think it's all building upon itself. So what Richard has been talking about, what I've been talking about, really, and if you think about management systems, there is a role for everyone in the organization. So part of the business leaders, whether it's the board of directors, whether it's your C-suites, your managing directors, they have a role and responsibility within everything that's done. And I think I give the analogy, I'm trying to give a cricket analogy instead of a US baseball analogy. So I'm trying to think this through. So pardon me if I get it all mixed up. I've attended many a cricket match that went on for days, but I'm not sure about the intricacies. But it's that concept of, the pitcher is throwing, right, to the batter, and the batter is going to bat. But then there's the catcher, right? It's the person behind that batter that has that glove, has that mitt, as we call it in baseball. And we, as health and safety professionals, catch way too many balls. I know that's opposite of cricket, but we catch way too many balls. And what we need to be thinking is, with our change agent hat on, and ask more questions. Ask our leaders. So why is health and safety, really, why is it important to our organization from their personal perspective? So you start to really engage their hearts and minds. You also are engaging from a business perspective, but you make it personal as well as organizational. So that, to me, is one piece of the puzzle that we need to change about ourselves and how we are managing. Stop catching all those balls and fixing everything and running around with our hair on fire. Let's put that back in the strategy, as Richard talked about. So we align with the strategy of the business. And in that strategy, everyone in that organization has roles and responsibilities. And safety is not separate. It's, human capital. It's the people working in the organization. It's their health and safety, in addition to having benefits and good working conditions, right? So we need to be really pushing back to say, what is that operational perspective? What's their role? What is the leader doing to engage their people? And what are the measurements and the measurement tools that the organization is using to actually demonstrate performance in OSH, but also to tie it into corporate performance?
Thanks for that.
Absolutely. Can I come in there, Melissa?
Yeah, because I was just going to ask you if you wanted to.
Yeah, totally agree with everything Kathy said there. If we think that this is just about health and safety, we're kind of missing the point. This needs to be organisational wide. In fact, I'd go right to the top and start looking at corporate values. And in my experience, organisational values are usually a lot more espoused than they are actually in use. And I think as time's marching on, I think it's going to be important that organisations reverse that trend. So when they've got on their website, our core values are integrity, honesty. Historically, I think they're great things to have on the website, but often they haven't been followed through. And they're going to get caught out on that now. I think the more we're looking at psychosocial risk-taking and so forth, really those values, people are going to hold them up to that like a mirror. And hang on the one hand, you're saying your value is integrity. On the other hand, you're doing this and this and this. So it starts right at the top. It starts at the board level. It starts with, you say your corporate values are these, demonstrate them.
No, thanks for that. Richard, you mentioned a report in your starting piece. Did you want to maybe say what that report you were referring to?
No. So I was reading just the extract that you had from the third party's report. I would like to just comment in support of what's been said to that question though. So back in the original question, I think both Clive and Kathy talked on the importance of communication. So I think whose responsibility is the change? I don't think the safety and health profession can take it all on itself. I think there's a couple of things that just have to be fundamental principles, unless everybody wants to go and buy a Superman cape and start rushing around. So yeah, for me, the first principle is the business is going to deliver the results that it needs to deliver, be it for the owner, the shareholder, whatever. So your role is to understand their strategy and help give them responsible options for how they're going to do it. You know, if they've got to make £100 million profit, they're going to make £100 million profit, or people are going to get fired. So how do you help them make £100 million profit in a responsible way? So certainly when I'm talking in that community, I always try and use the language of, look, it's your strategy. We just want to give you responsible choices for how you'll deliver it. You know, we're not trying to change their outcome. We're just trying to change some of the inputs that they use to get there. The other thing that we talk about is that practically the you know, whatever they call the function, say, let's call it safety and health for now, it can't be everywhere. It can't do everything. A model of control is just absolutely redundant in most organizations, because you know, if I think about an organization like you know, like L'Oreal, where Mark Staves employs 650 odd health and safety professionals, he's also operating in 120 odd countries. So, you know, they cannot be everywhere and in every operation. The only way they can succeed is if they coach and educate and help the people who are actually carrying out the task do it safer, do it better, do it whatever they think, using their technical judgment. So I think part of the responsibility is for the profession to assume a coaching role rather than a controlling role, and that will help it communicate better with the wider organization, gain more acceptance, understand other people's goals, help other people succeed. And, you know, unsurprisingly, the more you help other people succeed, the more people want to engage with you. So I think you can get on a really, really virtuous circle by just understanding what other people are trying to do and give them better choices for how to do it.
Yeah, no, thanks. So we've gotten a couple of chats and questions coming through, and Louise will help us as well with some of the questions. So I actually think the question James asks is a good one, maybe for us to raise here. And Clive, he mentioned your book, and I have to say I did enjoy reading that book. Hope that's okay to say here, but it is
Absolutely.
it's a good book. So Louise, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, no, really, there's really great discussion. It'd be great to see a bit more in the chat, actually. So, you know, if you've got a view or a perspective, you know, this is as much about the guys in the audience. So please do, you know, start to contribute. There's a really great question in here, which I'm going to give to Clive, but I think then go to Richard. So James has said, yeah, he loves your book. I think we're definitely going to sell a few copies of that tonight. And he says, in my organisation, I've been keen to move the sole focus away from standard safety performance. And we're not going to get into a discussion about safety 1 or safety 2. So I'm going to bypass that piece. And then he says, from your perspective, what safety indicators should we move towards trying to support so that we're moving into this facilitative phase, which we all want to get to, but, you know, we all know as well what isn't measured isn't managed. So I'm going to pose that question to Clive and then to Richard, because I know, Richard, you'll have responses to that too.
It's a great question. And look, the whole thing about metrics in safety, we could do a whole episode on that, I'm sure. Frankly, I'm not a huge fan of metrics in safety, full stop. I do, though, believe if you're going to measure what matters, and historically, of course, what we do is we measure lag indicators, which in no way predict how safe we are right now. So for me, and I think most people are actually starting to move away from lag indicators as much as you know, some of these safety regulators will allow us to anyway, moving more towards lead indicators. But even then, lead indicators are still not great predictors. If we measure what matters, if you look at what predicts really effective safety cultures and climates, you're measuring there things like trust and things like psychological safety. And so for me, you know, that alone will serve you very well. If you've got high levels of trust that you can demonstrate, high levels of psychological safety, that is going to predict all manner of positive things, and not just in the safety sphere. That the research is really clear that high levels of psychological safety is the biggest predictor of high performing teams. So this is beyond health and safety. And so for me, measure what matters. As Carsten Bush said in his recent book, if we can't measure it, maybe we shouldn't. And so yeah, I think maybe we do need to focus on what the evidence tells us, measure what matters.
Thanks, Richard.
Oh, look, I can't add anything to that. That's just a fantastic answer. I was on a webinar earlier today with the International Corporate Governance Network, and we had a very, very similar discussion. Not as eloquent as that, I might add, Clive. But yeah, we're potentially measuring the wrong things. We potentially have things that are inconsistent. Therefore, I'm not sure what it adds. I'm going to say something controversial now, so I'll declare my background, and hopefully you'll give me a get out of jail card for saying it. So I'm a marketeer by training. All of my qualifications are either business related, governance related. I'm a chartered fellow of the Chartered Institute of Marketing. I'm a member of the IOD with their qualifications as well. So I sort of I'm probably client side of the fence in this conversation, regardless of who my employer is. They don't employ me to do health and safety. They employ me to lead strategy and corporate engagement. So I'm so glad Louise said what she said about flavors of safety, because I know that it's really, really important, and I know it's a hot topic, and I know you could, have that debate all day, but you lose the external community when you have it. You're just talking to yourselves. The thing that really, really matters is that you can convince the great unwashed like me, how you're going to move the dial on the things that I get measured against. So I wouldn't even begin to understand that, that as a debating point. But if you can convince me how you'll make my organization more resilient, if you can convince me how you'll improve my reputation, if you can convince me how you'll drive my business results, you'll have my attention, regardless of what philosophy you want to follow to then deliver the thing. If you get the order to go away and do it, you'll get measured on your outputs, and sometimes that conversation can be a little bit of an input, and it's fascinating for the profession, but I think it distracts at times from the value you can add. So grateful that Louise framed that in the way that she did.
Yeah. Thanks, Richard.
And just one thing, onto that. I've been involved in metrics for such a long time now. So I was part of the project working group, and we're going to talk about ESG. Hopefully we'll get there. ESG, specifically in the world of sustainability, what are the metrics for companies to report in their sustainability or corporate responsibility reports. So I was on the GRI Global Reporting Initiative project working group. And in being in that group, we brought a cross-section of stakeholders. So this external world that Richard's talking about, not just the internal corporate world. So we had investors, we had rating agencies, the ones that basically say whether you're going to be on FTSE for good or not, or listed on MCII as a company that is a sustainable company. So what I've come to know is, and I heard it, Richard, I did get to listen in on the webinar earlier today. And Tim Eldridge basically talked about, he actually pleaded with the investor who was also on it, would you please use ISO 45001? And I'm not an advocate for 45001, even though I helped develop that as a US delegate. But I would say that that is probably our best leading indicator at the moment. But I think all of us will appreciate it depends on your company, right? How willing your company, how your culture is, Clive has talked about, their willingness to learn, their willingness to identify what the risks are, and their willingness to actually do something about it, so actioning that. But that management system concept, it's proactive if an organization wants to use that as a management tool. And by the way, everything in your company is around a management plan, do, check, act. They may not know it, but ERPs, quality, safety, maintenance, it's all about planning, doing, checking, and acting. So with that, I'll turn that back. But I do think that we are in a world where metrics count, and yes, they need to be relevant, they need to be realistic, they need to be measurable, and they need to be comparable. But I don't think we're going to get out of that world anytime soon. So we need to really work, and I know IOSH is working on this, to find the right metrics.
No, thanks. That leads in very well to the question David was going to bring up. And there was a follow-up question around metrics and measurements. So we've covered that. But David, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I want to pick up on something Richard has said, something Kathy said, and something Clive has said, because I'm making notes left, right, and centre. First of all, Richard, because you're closest to me on the screen, sadly. In fact, I'm next to Clive and you're below me, Richard. You said something very early on. You talked about people in their careers, and the person doing health and safety full time, obviously that's their bread and butter. But those in the corporate world, moving on to other things, developing their careers, maybe leaving health and safety behind them. Do you think IOSH can support the latter people who health and safety becomes less and less as their career? So in a way, Richard, like the day you're a chief executive, your marketeering may be part of it. I know you never leave it behind, but that's your question. Very quickly for Clive, you mentioned psychosocial risks. I'm always cautious when we all of a sudden, because part of psychosocial risk factors is the mental health history and things such as that. We're not privy to that. It's a clinical profession. So my view is beware of caution moving into that area unless you're qualified. And finally, Kathy, the observation for yourself about well-being, the CIPD actually do consider it's things like working conditions and also opportunity for promotion, career development, that's well-being. And these things are all telling me, especially with what you were saying, Richard, moving in with the governance forum, is health and safety just a part of our individual skill set? And that's just a reflection there for the three things that you've said. It seems it's health and safety plus these other things that are coming in from the periphery. Each of you are, as a yes, no answer for each of you. Is that a fair observation? Kathy?
What is that? What is the other thing? Is there an option for a third?
I want to go to ESG in a minute, but no, come on.
When you're specifically talking about the well-being part, yes. For us, I think we are business advisors. I think that's what we do, period. And I think when we start looking at ourselves with that lens, then we understand we have subject matter expertise in health and safety and well-being, right? But a lot of us don't, even though it's in the CPD, we do not have a concept on well-being. As a matter of fact, I have a colleague that I'm working with in a very large multinational organization who is pushing back so hard on the mental health and well-being part of his job. And I'm like, well, you don't have to do it all. Right? It's the glove thing. You got HR in there. You've got a lot of other business leaders that are there that you need to be working with. You don't have to manage it. So I think that once we start really understanding what our real role is, that consultant to business, that advisor to business, we're not there to tell them yes or no. We're there to give them really good information so they can make good business decisions. I think that's our role.
That's the best option 3 tonight, Kathy.
Woo!
Shall I go, Richard? Do you want to pick up on my comment from yourself?
Yeah. So firstly, just completely agree with what Kathy said there. This is about how you advise the business to do things rather than control the business, and it comes back to the point of just give them responsible choices that aren't going to keep you awake at night. You've got a moral compass, you've got some technical skills. Use them to give people good advice. How can we help you get to that senior part? The reason it's not a yes or no answer, David, as you can probably tell. So I've got the same dilemma as Kathy. So if I just relate to my own career, I can't talk passionately about anybody else's. So I started off in a functional specialism, and I started getting promoted because I was presumably good at it. And as I got promoted, the thing that I loved and was passionate about became less and less of my job, which is why I said, you might be satisfied, supporting colleagues operationally on the site, because as you get more senior in any role, you know, all of a sudden you start to become part accountant, part HR manager, and less doing whatever it is, you know, in your case, occupational safety and health, that thing that you love, because you've got to manage teams, you've got to manage budgets, and you know, and that can become a grind, to be perfectly honest, because it's like Groundhog Day. So you've got to decide that that's what you want in your career, because if not, you'll just make yourself desperately unhappy, and you'll suddenly wake up one day and realize you're a HR manager and an accountant. And to a certain extent, I then had to retrain. So all of my marketing qualifications suddenly become a lesser part of my job. So I did an MBA. And then I did governance qualifications with the IOD when that started becoming more of my job. So I had to think about the different lenses that my career was taking, but continually follow the ethos of any professional body, which is about, you know, continual professional development and ensuring that you're competent. It's just that as you get, you know, different roles, the lenses through which your job's viewed will change, and the definition of competence will change. So fortunately, IOSH recognises that, to get back to David's question. And in our competency framework, you'll find that only about 50% of the skills listed are what you'd call traditional technical safety and health. And if I can, yeah, so Zoe's asked a great question on the chat room about if you were going to write a job description, where would you start? I'd absolutely leave health and safety. That'd be the last thing I'd go to. I'd focus on all the skills you needed to be a brilliant business partner, and then add the technical bits in that make you a good health and safety business partner right at the end, because that's the bit you'll know, because, you know, that's the bit that you live and breathe. The bits I'd really start thinking about are what makes you a great communicator, what makes you a great influencer, what makes you a good strategist. You don't have to be the best accountant in the business, but it'd be really helpful if you were the best non-accountant at speaking finance. Then your ideas would be better understood by the finance community than all the other non-accountants trying to explain to them why to do stuff. So yeah, you know, just think about who you've got to interact with, and make sure there's a little bit of that in there. But communication, influencing, negotiation, without a shadow of a doubt, would be where I'd start in writing up a job description for anything around this area.
That's a fantastic answer, Richard, and hope people can look outside of their own box for that, because that way of thinking. You know, management consultant, I like that, Kathy. You can put a few more pounds on that a year, or dollars a year. I'll talk about the question. We continue to hear and see more about sustainability and ESG in business. Can you summarize what it all means, and what does it have to do with health and safety? And should we be part of it, losing any momentum and the pandemic has given to health and safety on the business agenda?
I think that's for me, right?
Yep, that's you, Kathy. Yep.
Woohoo! All right.
Pitch in, Clive, then Richard afterwards.
So what I want, if you don't take away anything today from me, I want you to hear the word opportunity. And this really ties in with what Richard just said about us being business advisors. And I think he and I really haven't had this conversation with you, Richard. So we're very, very much aligned in the role of the safety professional. But it's knowing this business environment in which we're operating. So opportunity abounds. I'm going to give you this analogy. You just won the lottery. You bought the ticket, and we're talking £1 million is going to be yours, right? But the key is you got to get, if you're down in the south of England, you got to get up to Glasgow to pick up your money, to cash that thing in. And you really don't know how to get to Glasgow. I mean, there's trains, planes, automobiles. So you kind of have to figure all of that out. Are you going to sit and say, well, it's too hard, or I don't really know how to get to Glasgow, so I'm just going to forgo that £1 million? Or are you going to take the opportunity and figure out how the heck you're going to get to Glasgow, and knowing that's going to take time and energy, and you might even have to take off of work? So this is what's the analogy of what's lying in front of us. This whole idea of sustainability and environmental, social, and governance, or ESG, that David has just shared. We don't have to ask. We won the lottery. We don't have to push our way into sustainability. So I'm here to tell you, sustainability is not only about the environment. It is about the social side. And honestly, I do 2-day seminars on this. So to really kind of cover this is really, I'm going to be really bad at covering this in 2 seconds. But we are part of, so you've got environment, social, and governance, how an organization governs. And Richard actually talked a little bit about that earlier. But we are firmly sat in on the social side. We are about the people, and people are at the core of every thriving business, right? And their health, their safety, and their well-being is all part and parcel, if you will, to the extent to which that company, that business, that organization is actually going to thrive. And that is part of sustainability. That's part of this ESG. So you might be saying, well, Kathy Seabrook, that's all well and good because you're saying that, but who cares about this? The other really important piece to this is that the companies and their stakeholders, it used to be only the shareholders, right? They saw value in a company and it was only financial value. So they wanted to know your return on investment. They wanted to know your corporate performance. But now those shareholders and investors are saying, we want to know a little bit more about that side of social. We want to know more about the people. And when you're thinking about people, people are people in the communities that you're going to hire to do the work, right? And the communities themselves and the sustainability of the communities. They're about your customers, they're about your suppliers and your value chain or your supply chain and the workers there. They are your workers in and employees in your company. And part of the social piece, and this is the lottery, folks, is that part of how that's measured in the world of sustainability now is safety and health is integral. It's a part of it. It's not, oh, we have to make the business case. It's part of it. It's part of what's being asked. Now, taking us back to measurement, what's being asked is like, it's lagging indicators to Clive's point, and it's really not of value. But this is why we have to have measurement. We have to be able to demonstrate OSH performance. And if we don't get in there and this is where IOSH comes in, if we don't get in there and define what those metrics look like, someone else is. HR, right now, there's an ISO standard getting ready in reporting around occupational health and safety. And frankly, they don't know us. We need to be in there. So I would say that there's so much going on in this world of sustainability, but for us, it's all of those stakeholders, not just the shareholders. So not just investors, but it's your customers, it's your suppliers, it's the government, the EU in particular. And I know about Brexit, so don't freak out. But the UK is following the EU directive. It's their own, but following the same directives around what is required for reporting in sustainability CR reports and annual reports. And that is the annual accounts. That is what is important, because sustainability, this ESG, is what is known as the non-financials, and the non-financial part of a business that needs to report on its impacts that could, and sorry, this is the only other word I'm going to throw out to you. And if you don't get it, you've got to figure this out. This is part of horizon scanning. This is part of what we need to know, is this concept of materiality. And materiality is something that in our world, in our speak, it would be a high consequence risk to the business, and something that is actually going to go boom in the night. It's going to kill a lot of people. But from an investor's perspective, it's going to impact their decision as to whether they're going to invest in you. From a customer perspective, it's going to be whether or not that customer decides to buy your product, whether it's a B2B or whether it's a consumer product. From a worker, and this is where we really shine, from a worker's perspective, this impacts recruiting, retention, promotion, engagement of your people, of your workers, in the world of, and I have to say this word, even though we hate this word, human capital. And so the concept of human capital is what the investors call it. It's one of the 6 capitals of a company. And so people and human capital, and is there anything that would materially impact the business related to safety and health and people? So I'll leave you with this. Think COVID. Think pre-COVID. Do you think the whole world, everybody in the world, had any clues to what the term PPE meant? They do now. So we're on the radar screen. So sorry for that long-windedness, but that's pretty good compared to 2 days.
Clive, you ought to say something on this one.
Yeah. First, thank you, Kathy, for putting the focus there on the social aspect of ESG. And I'm just going to reiterate that too. We downplay the social aspect at our peril. There is no ESG without a focus on that. Let me quote some research. I'm a research-based animal. I believe in doing what works. This is a quote that I featured in my book, but it was an Australian study. And one of the concluding paragraphs was, unless the mistrust of the workforce can be overcome, even the most sophisticated and well-intentioned management initiatives will be treated with cynicism and undermined. So think about that. Unless we get the social stuff right, unless we build trust in those relationships, frankly, nothing else we do is going to make any difference. And so again, we just downplay the social. Now, socially, and all of this has been sort of put into the, if you will, the basket of soft skills, which is one of the most misleading descriptors I think that are out there. Unless we actually start getting better at overcoming mistrust, building trust, building psychological safety, any initiatives that we put in place to try and build momentum in the area of ESG will literally be undermined by the workforce. So just want to show my agreement with Kathy here. Let's really get that social side right.
Richard, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's how do you follow this too? So yeah, I mean, again, in complete agreement, and it's something that's really important to IOSH, and it's been one of the absolute step changes in how we're perceived on the global stage. You know, back in 2015, the world signed a treaty where it was going to deliver 17 sustainable development goals, and basically, when we've gone around various countries, various governments looking at what's doing, the one thing they've all got in common is they've signed that treaty and they're working out how to meet their obligations. So we tend to align to the UN Global Compact definition. So if you've not heard of the UN Global Compact, just think of it as the world's largest trade association, and basically in there they look at sustainability through 4 lenses, and I think you can drive at least 3 of them and you know, argue quite easily around the 4th. So they look at the world through the lens of financial sustainability, and I touched earlier on, you know, what's the reputation. So, you know, if you're killing people in your organization, it doesn't matter how many trees you plant to try and get to net zero, sooner or later somebody's going to say, yeah, that's great, but you killed 100 people, so you're not really that sustainable as an organization, are you? And you know, that will immediately impact your financial performance, your share price, undermine customer trust in you. There's an ethical consideration, so ethical sustainability. Environmental sustainability is probably the one that gets measured the most, and you know, I guess it's got a head start, so people automatically, I think, almost interchange environmentalism and sustainability and think that they're talking about the same thing and completely miss the social lens. And you know, it's in that social lens, there's something like I think there's 169 targets sit behind the 17 goals, and about 53 of them can directly be influenced by occupational safety and health. So don't let anybody tell you that sustainability is narrow and it's about environmentalism, and you know, you've got evidence to suggest otherwise. There's a massive number of the targets that you can influence, about a third of them. So if they understand sustainability and they understand the targets, so one way of looking at it is that you are social sustainability professionals. If we then get onto ESG, that, you know, that is the reporting mechanism without a shadow of a doubt, and it is primarily looking at non-financial reporting indicators. You know, the challenge there, and Kathy's touched on it in metrics, is there isn't consistency of definition. And one of the things that you may have seen through our member communication channels is we've just run a survey of what sustainability means to people. We got something like 500 odd responses to it, So what we're going to do with that information is roll it forward, and we're looking to build a campaign to try and champion this cause a little bit as IOSH, that there is this concept of people sustainability, and it's just a really critical thing. And if you thought about it, you as a consumer wouldn't choose to buy presumably from a brand that was knowingly harming people. You wouldn't choose to invest your money in something that came where the returns came at that cost. And therefore, what makes you think that responsible investors feel any differently?
I want to come in here just for a couple of things, and then I think Louise wanted to add something. So just in terms of time, and I should have said this at the start, we were going to go an hour of the panel, and then the last 30 minutes would be like a branch update. But I think the conversation's been going so well. Maybe just for another 10 minutes, if Kathy, Clive, and Richard are okay, just to continue this dialogue, because I want to go back to what Zoe's asked, but bringing it together with what we've talked about and what our role is going forward. But I just wanted to bring that in. Louise, you wanted to bring up something?
Yeah, there's a few things that are kind of coming through on the chat function that matches some of what you're saying, and it's about a single word. And Robert Higgins has put a great message in the chat box, and it's all about trust. Trust has to be central to the whole working relationship with employees at all levels. And I did a panel debate with future leaders, was it last week or the week before, and we started talking about this word trust, and I just think it'd be really interesting just to quickly go around the panel and to ask you guys what this word trust, what can we do? How can we facilitate and influence to build trust in organizations? If we start with Clive, go to Kathy and then Richard.
Yep. Well, I just wrote a whole book about that. The whole book is about why we need trust in safety. But where you have low trust, you have high fear in the safety context. And where there is fear, you will get bad data. In other words, we're talking here about metrics. If you have not first overcome the mistrust of the workforce, your metrics are really going to reflect bad data. So it's fundamental in that regard too. Where you have low trust, people won't speak up. They won't report near misses. They won't put forward ideas. So innovation is stymied. So trust is actually fundamental to physical health and safety, but also psychological health and safety. And one of the things I write about in the book, and it's a theme right through the book, is leaders need to bring their teams in. Historically, what we've done in health and safety is we do safety to people, which is really odd when you think about it, because safety is one of those areas where we immediately have a shared goal, right? We all have a goal, leaders, teams, managers, the board. We all want to be safe and well. We've already got a shared goal, which is brilliant. We don't always get that in business. But then what we have tended to do historically, even though we've got a shared goal, we will bring in compliance measures to kind of force people towards behaving in certain ways to get to the goal that they already want. And we do safety to people. We seek to build compliance. We give them the policies, procedures, systems, tools. There's no ownership in that for the crews. And so the more we do it to people, the less there is intrinsic motivation, ownership, engagement, and trust. And what we've seen lately is, and again, a benefit of COVID is we sort of had to, as leaders, bring our people in to collaborate more, to ask them more questions. And the more we've done that, we start to get a workforce who starts to perceive a little bit more perceived control, ownership, intrinsic motivation. And that can have a beautiful byproduct of that approach, can be building trust. It is absolutely fundamental. I could talk about this all night, of course, but let me pause there for the others.
Am I next? All right. I'm going to take a little different tack. I agree with everything Clive said. And I'm going to put a different lens on that. I put in the chat, there's a book called Leadership on the Line. It's by two Harvard professors. And It's about leading during change. Remember the very beginning, I talked about we are agents of change. It's called leadership from my perspective. The term is leadership courage. And I think that is one of the things that we have to have. So leading, whether it's a new management system, whether it's a risk assessment process, whether it's engaging workers in different ways, whatever the initiative is, a new lean initiative, and you're integrating risk assessment into your lean Kaizens, whatever it is, it's being able to be, and I love this analogy, it's being able to be on the balcony or the dance floor. So picture yourself, you're in this ballroom and there's all these people, some people are dancing and there are people, some wallflower people, there's people on the balcony. And it's this idea, again, takes us back to the beginning of understanding the business, understanding the business environment. So when we get on the balcony and look at strategy and look at the big picture of what's actually happening, this concept of trust comes into that. And we, through many of the indicators that we have, understand when there's an environment of trust and when there's not. And then going down to the dance floor where our workers are and having conversations and having those relationships and finding out what's really going on, and then making sure you're going, up and down. And so you've heard of the concept of learning organizations, right? Organizations that have high levels of trust, and they're not blame organizations. So when an incident happened, it's a matter of let's learn what happened so we can prevent it from happening again. Whereas a blame culture is, everybody put your bloody hands in your pockets because they're coming for somebody and you're going to get fired. That absolutely, everything Clive said in terms of engagement and everything else comes into play. But Louise, that question you asked, that I think for us is really important, is where are we in there? So I think, again, as the business advisor, we are not going to fix that. That has to be fixed by leadership, but we can be the mirror. We can be the one that actually has those conversations because we built those relationships with our business leaders, operational, C-suite, and boards of directors. And I mean, all of those, we should be building those relationships no matter what level you're on. You can pick up a call and say, I'd just like to understand a little bit more and just listen. But to do this, we have to be able to come back to them to say, these are some of the things that I'm seeing, and mirror that back. But the leaders are the ones that are going to have to make the decisions for change to be an environment that's more learning organization that has a very high level of trust.
So Richard, go ahead. And then I want to ask kind of a question to bring it all together, which I would want yourself, Richard, to lead on from an IOSH piece, if that's okay. But go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I'll put a third slant on it. I completely agree with everything that's just been said, by the way. I guess I just want to put something a little bit simpler on it. I guess trust starts with an individual and an individual. So if you're going to be that business partner and take that approach, then try and find out what somebody else's problem is, work out how you can solve it, agree the solution with them, go away and deliver it. If you give and you deliver first, then you are likely to be trusted, or you will start on the relation. You'll start to build that reputation in the organisation, and if you can deliver, if you can impact, if you behave ethically, then you will be trusted as an individual, and then you can become that change agent locally and around you, and you can start to influence what's happening in the wider organization as well. So absolutely, it's got to be a culture that lets these things happen, but equally you can choose to behave in a trustworthy manner and hope that that gets recognized and respected. But I tend to find you have to give that first and earn it.
No, thanks. And that's a really good question. And we framed this today, to come through certain themes, and I think we've touched on all of them. So I guess my concluding question, or the question to bring it all together, right? So the title of this was From Compliance to Care to Business Leadership. And Kathy touched on it in terms of grabbing that opportunity. So what's the one thing each of y'all would recommend for us as health and safety professionals to do different going forward then? Or is it that we have it all in terms of what's needed for the future, or is there something we need to work on going forward? And is it solely up to us as health and safety professionals, or is there a bigger picture to bring it together? So I guess maybe Richard, are you okay to start on that?
Oh yeah. Compliance to care to business leadership. Look, it's a journey, isn't it? You know, everybody can be a leader in their own right, and you know, you can blame the culture that your organization operates in for not letting you be those things. So, you know, frankly, do as I did previously, go and find a different company to work for. If it, you know, if your moral compass isn't aligned to your employer's moral compass, you're just going to be miserable. And I appreciate that's easy to say, you know, you might not have those options, but you know, I was fortunate I did. And when I found my moral compass pointing in a different direction to my employers, and I couldn't change my employer, I knew I didn't want to change myself, so I changed the circumstances and the environment by leaving. So yeah, the main thing for me in that thing is focus on the business leadership bit. You've got to be a leader in your business, and you're not going to be a leader in your business if you know, you're walking around with the rule book and the manual and you're technically explaining people what to do. You know, you've got to win those hearts and minds. You've got to understand their problem, and you've got to work out how to save it, how to fix it. And I'll come back to something I said earlier. You know, just give them responsible choices. You don't have to do it for them. You have to coach them as to what their options are. And you know, if your moral compass is anything like mine, you'll only give them responsible options that you're willing to, you know, that aren't going to keep you awake at night.
Thanks. Clive?
Okay, compliance to care. So for me, that could equally be voiced as from fear to trust. Again, I'm not saying compliance is a bad thing, by the way. We want people to, you know, especially on high hazard tasks, we want people to comply with the way it needs to be done. But historically, we've sought to gain compliance by forcing compliance. That's what needs to change, because that drives away things like engagement, intrinsic motivation. Look, the good news, Melissa, is it's happening. And I think there is a movement away from the fear-based approach. So there's a lot of positives in this. Many companies have seen that the more mature, safety speaking, mature safety climates, they've done this to a degree already. And the main way they do it, and there's a whole range of things we can do, but the main way they've done it is by bringing the workforce in. So this is not just about the health and safety team. Relax, guys and girls. All right. Not everything should be on the shoulders of health and safety. This is a leadership. This is an organizational shared responsibility. But look, the organizations that are doing this well and frankly, setting the bar, raising the bar for other organizations to aspire to, they're not doing it with platitudes and slogans. They're doing it by bringing their people in, viewing their people as the experts that do the role. So rather than me saying, here's the policy, the procedure, make sure you comply to it, I'm asking them, what do you need to do the job well and safely? Safety to me is just doing work well and reliably, consistently. And the workforce have a huge amount of information that would help us. As Amy Edmondson, in her wonderful book that I recommend every leader and every safety person read, The Fearless Organization, she said, it shouldn't be just hit and miss bringing your people in. It should be literally embedded within your company, an opportunity for what she calls the brain's trust to come on in, and we can then hear from them. What does the job look like for you? What would you do differently? Where has drift occurred? We were doing it this way, now we're doing it this way. Where has that occurred? How are we risk managing that? What do you need to do that well, and so forth? The organizations that do that regularly and consistently are the ones who build trust. And where you build high trust, you lower the fear. So people will speak up. Your data, your surveys will actually reflect more so reality and so forth. So again, there's many, many ways leaders can do that, but it's not a health and safety role. It is the role of all leaders, and eventually a shared responsibility within the organization.
No, thanks, Clive. Kathy?
Yeah, I'd build on that. when you think about, because I'm trying to get my head around this concept of care in your definition of care. And when I think of care, I think about people in general. So to me, that is a leadership issue. Yes, we have a role to play in that as safety and health professionals. And one of the ways that care for our people, the output or what it looks like is that they're safe and they're healthy and frankly, they love their job. They're fulfilled, that sense of well-being. That's like the output, if you will. And if you think about a management system, that's the output of the management system. So that's the output of having leaders engaged and everything, that's already been said, modeling what this looks like, actually asking questions, engaging, and that sort of thing. But I'd like to really leave and turn this a little on its head, leave this question with the concept of why. If you haven't watched The Golden Circles by Simon Sinek, which has been out for a long time, but it makes what we do personal. And it's this concept, and it's us thinking, and this is what I do in all the seminars I do. I start with the why. Why are you here? In terms of what motivates you as a safety and health and safety professional to actually do this work. Because at the end of the day, we're not going to make the same amount of money as those, people, those stockbrokers and whatnot who make trillions of dollars. That's just not who we are, right? We do this. We typically have a purpose. Not all of us, but we typically have some moral compass inside of us that says this is really good and very important work in the world. So it's what's your why? But what's important in terms of this question of going to compliance, and by the way, compliance is your license to do business in any country, so you got to do that. But to go to care, which is where you create these learning culture, this trust culture, as Clive keeps really expressing, and I totally am in agreement with that. To do that, we need to get in the hearts and minds of the leaders. And so it's these one-on-one conversations you have to say, well, tell me what you think. Why were we doing this? And to Richard's point, if the culture is not the right culture, and in your interview for your next job, it's part of it is asking that question. So eyes wide open, if you will. So that concept of why, why does your company do what they do, and how does health and safety fit in with that? It's aligned, it's embedded, it's not something separate because you have to do it because the government says so. Food for thought.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, thank you all so much. I think we could go on for a while. There's so many different nuggets here. And Brenton just put something here that I'll use that in terms of summarizing. And then there's just one thing I want to do from a branch perspective. But yeah, he said, what a fabulous example of subject matter experts that we have on tonight sharing their knowledge and expertise. Really grateful to have had the three of you all here, to have Louise as well supporting the conversation. We'd love to have you all back to further the conversations. I personally believe that the future of the health and safety professional is super bright, as Katia said, just great opportunity. So it's for us to continue to grab that, and through collaboration, learning. We had some other questions that I think we'll have to have a part 2 on this. So I just really want to thank Clive for getting up so early, just amazing. Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome.
You're all welcome to join our branch.